Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. JustusRStone here with my review on volume number 4 of the light novel series Log Horizon. This is the official English release from Yen On. Now, this one picks up immediately following the events of volume number 3, so there may be some mild spoilers for volume 3, just so you know. So at the end of volume 3, spoilers like I said, we have our camp of newbies being attacked by a bunch of sort of seafaring goblins, Segwayings, or I'm not too sure how to pronounce some of these things, apologize, but you know, I'm reading it, so I'm just kind of guessing at it. Anyway, so this of course is sort of a shocking event that all of a sudden these creatures they really don't expect to show up are suddenly attacking them. And we find out in this book that that is only a prelude to a much larger, like we're talking the tens of thousands of goblins who are now marching on the League of Free Cities to conquer and plunder and destroy. Now, the Round Table Council finds themselves in a tight spot because on the one hand, they don't want to alienate the people of the earth and leave them basically to burn as the goblins attack. But on the other hand, they don't want to be seen as sort of the lapdogs who just come and sort of rush in to save the day just because the League of Free Cities snaps their fingers and says, do it. How they get around this whole situation, well, I mean, that's part of the story. But what makes it really cool and why I continue to enjoy Log Horizon is because it takes a rather mature viewpoint of the events that are going on. So like I said, there are these political considerations. It isn't just Shiro and his sort of party, Krusty and Michitaka at this sort of League of Free Cities meeting. They're not just jumping and saying, yes, we'll help you, even though they know it's probably the moral thing to do, even though they know it's the right thing to do, and even though they know that if they want to advance their relationships with the people of the earth, they probably aren't going to have much choice. They realize that they're also in a bit of a corner. First of all, because, like I said, they don't want to become the crutch that the League of Free Cities leans on all the time. But on the other hand, they also realize that their own control of Akiba and the adventurers in Akiba is a very loose sort of thing. They realize that really they don't rule or control the adventurers. They're just basically existing there to try and make sort of life better for everybody. And they realize then that they have no power to actually command the adventurers to go. And so they all find themselves sort of in a corner. And of course, the League of Free Cities, the people of the earth, find themselves kind of in a bind because one of the sort of existing game things, which was the Knights of Izumo, I think that's how they called it. Anyway, it was a special league of knights that essentially would appear when the world was in great crisis and would kind of tip the scales in the favor of the continued existence of the people of the earth. Well, they don't exist. They have disappeared, basically. They're one of the few things and mechanics of the game that don't exist. And so they realized that they themselves could probably fight off the goblins, but the cost in terms of lives and the cost in terms of resources and everything else, just, it's probably not worth it to them. Well, I mean, it's worth it to them, obviously, to survive, but it's just the cost is almost too staggering to even begin to imagine. So you have this sort of political impasse that these two different entities find themselves at. And to me, it's cool because, and that's one of the things about Log Horizon I like, is that you have these intricacies, you have these diplomacies and these things. And it's funny because we have Shiro's group in that situation, but then again, like we had in volume number 3, we have sort of Shiro's group, and then as a pivot point, we have Minori and her brother and Isuzu and Rudy and their group. We have them as sort of these fresher newbies, and we get a similar viewpoint on them. So for them, they're nearby this city that they realize is right in the line of attack. And they're sort of sitting there trying to decide whether they should help these people. And Tomo's thinking to himself, like, he wants to. He knows that he wants to, but he's trying to come up with an excuse to justify it until finally they're just like, well, let's do it because we want to. Like, we don't need to justify it. And so it's funny because you have this really pure sort of innocence and just this let's do it because we can attitude of this younger group. And then at the same time, we are sort of getting the juxtaposition of that with Shiro and sort of the older players who are now in a political position where they realize that even though that's sort of where their hearts are leaning, that it's not so simple just to go, hey, that's why we're going to do it and we're just going to go ahead. The fun thing about Log Horizon also is that there are a lot of characters, and each of the characters is given their little moments to shine, and each of the characters are given moments where they become sort of the point of view character. One of the characters that we met in volume number 3 was Renetia. Again, I might be butchering her pronunciation. I am sorry. Just based on what I read. Anyhow, she is a princess of the people of the land. Her family is sort of the main ruling body of the people of the earth. And so we meet her and she's sort of this reluctant princess, this lazy sort of princess. She knows all the things that she should be doing and she kind of resents it really. Like she would rather just be in her flannel pajamas hanging out in her bedroom and not showering for a couple of days. I mean, that's just who she is. But we get to see her a lot more in this book as a point of view character. Using her I found was really effective in the same way that in volume number 3 we have sort of that newbie innocence juxtaposed with the more hardened adventurer and playing politics instead of just playing, in a battlefield in a dungeon. In this one we have that juxtaposition between points of view of people that are adventurers and now this point of view of the princess who is from the people of the earth, and this way that she views characters quite differently than A, the characters view themselves, or B, how those characters are viewed even by their fellow adventurers. And it gives you kind of an interesting perspective on the fact that these people of the earth are basically like us, right? They're human beings. They don't really have any, super advanced powers. If they die, they actually do die. They are mortal, unlike the adventurers who are reborn in the temple. And so we get from her point of view this impression of just how awe-inspiring, but also how fearful she gets. The fact that even though she sees sort of almost this joyfulness of these adventurers, there's also sort of a loneliness that she gets. Like, she is, to me, one of the higher points of the book, not just because her character is kind of fun because of her doubts and her own sort of questioning how the heck she got herself into this situation, but because her point of view is so vastly different than pretty much every other character who's in the series. Now, of course, the book deals with a massive battle, and it has the adventurers for the first time in this series organizing themselves into a massive raid party to face this goblin army. It's our first time to see sort of how a large-scale battle is handled. And truthfully, it's handled really well, and I enjoyed that we jumped sort of from a number of different battlefields and focused on different characters and different battle techniques that they were using in order to combat this thing. Everything from sort of small group, almost guerrilla type tactics to larger sort of shock and awe tactics. It was a really good mix of using the characters, using different sort of tactics that you would use even in playing like an MMORPG, using sort of these different ideas and playing off of different characters, and then viewing those battles through different point of view characters so that we can sort of get a gist of what's happening and how people are viewing it. When I talk about how people are viewed differently, I mean, Shiro is a great character because when we have a lot of point of view points with Shiro, which of course we do because he is one of the main characters, if not the main character, he is full of a lot of doubt. He questions himself constantly. And yet when you see other adventurers, they view him as this like cool and aloof and uber intelligent, he'll solve everything kind of guy. And then when we have like Renetia, who is of the people of the earth, she views him as almost sort of like this person who is like so full of schemes and stuff that she almost finds him to be like a frightful character. So again, like it illustrates how, the author is able to maneuver all these different points of view and to show us characters in different lights based on who happens to be dealing with them at the moment. About the only downfall of Log Horizon, and it's been a downfall since volume number 1, is it does get a little bit wordy. The descriptions could be a lot lighter. There's a lot of times where you have this really cool battle scene breaking, happening, and then all of a sudden, well, when Elder Tales was a game, if I had $5 for every time the phrase "when Elder Tales was a game" was used in this series, I could probably support my light novel habit for another 3 years. I mean, it sounds pretty brutal, and it's not horrible when you're actually reading the book, but it does get overused in my opinion, and often it breaks up the action. And I understand that it's being used because the author is trying to explain the mechanics of what's happening, because he is basing it on the kind of things that you would do in an MMORPG. So he's demonstrating like this incredible knowledge of MMORPGs, which at certain points are really cool and it's really fun and enjoyable and I like it. But when you're in the middle of this heated battle, it would be cool if that stuff was kind of just sort of explained before, so the battle could just kind of be fleet and light on its feet and just kind of blast through. It just kind of makes the pacing a little halting at times, which it's a minor complaint because overall the story is really well told and there's a lot of really cool ideas and things going on. But I just have to say that every now and then I find these books a little bit harder to get through just because it does make the pacing a little bit odd, especially, like I said, when you're in the middle of a very action-oriented sequence and all of a sudden it stops so you can have a lengthy explanation about game mechanics. So those are my thoughts on volume number 4 of Log Horizon. Again, a really good series. I do really enjoy it. Aside from the little critique I would say about the writing style, overall story is really well done, and I think the different points of view characters are used in a very effective manner. My next review is going to be on volume number 5 of Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? I haven't read one of these in quite some time. I do actually really enjoy this series, and I believe somebody said in the comments of volume number 4 that this is the one sort of where the anime leaves off. So I'm kind of looking forward to reading this one because I've had the anime in my Crunchyroll queue since it first came out, and I've refused to watch it until I get caught up and beyond it in the books. So I'm looking forward to reading this one and then settling down and watching myself a little bit of a anime marathon for the series. So that'll be my next video. If you're new to the channel, I've got places you can click to subscribe, either over here in this corner or down in the descriptions down below. I've also got links to my older light novel reviews as well as my manga reviews. And I don't just like to read books, I like to write them too, so you can check those out at that link up there. I look forward to seeing you in my next video, but until then, bye-bye for now.